Hey, folks. This is Rich with the X's and O's of Life, the interview edition. I have Mike Jaquith. Did I do it?
You did great. I'm
Oh, I'm
impressed.
so proud of myself because you told me how to do it, and then I got nervous and I was like, let's go, Jake, and I'll do the with an upward inflection.
It worked.
So, yeah, I try to do things well. So, once again, another fella I found on Podmatch and reached out to him, and he was kind enough to accept it. And, he does a lot of work with, I guess, coachings for men, I guess is the best way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good way of
And,
saying it.
and, just aid, because look, not for nothing, and I've covered this on the podcast itself. Guys don't really reach out and ask for help or admit that they're going through things because whatever silly masculinity issue, fear, whatever you want to call it, kind of comes into play. So, seemingly this fella has this thing by the short hairs. So I'm gonna stop rambling and I'm gonna let Mike go ahead and take the reins and tell us what he does, and we'll start yapping like we always do. So, go ahead, Mike.
No, I love it. And first off, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
And I think I want to start off, Rich, by pointing out that I think right now we are really in a crisis of masculinity. And what I mean by that is that most men, not only do they not know how to be men anymore, they don't even know what men is, and a result of which they have no idea how to be a healthy, holistic, well-balanced version of a man. And I realize that, we live in some pretty crazy times, and we have a Supreme Court justice that can't even tell us what a woman is. But let's at least, maybe see in this podcast, we can kind of touch a little bit on what is a man. And, when I work with people these days, so much of these like low level mental health challenges that men are facing come from a lack of identity. And all of us as human beings, we require this fundamental identity of who am I, what is my place in the world, what is my purpose here. And this is something we don't have anymore. And I don't mean this just merely in a religious sense, but certainly that also. But even in a what is a man, how do I know if I'm a man, and the statistics, Rich, are staggering. In households where you don't have a dad, the success rate of the kids is like just shattered. Like, what is it? Something like you're like 5x, 10x, 20x more likely, depending on which statistic you're looking at, to hit crime, drop out of school, drugs, all the bad stuff. All of it scales when dad's not there. And my claim to you in the audience is it scales in a similar way if dad himself doesn't know how to be a man and doesn't show up as a good man, compared to if dad himself was a well-grounded man who knows who he is. Does this make sense so far?
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious to see what your definition of a man is.
Excellent. Let's dive into that. So I want to introduce this concept of masculine and feminine. Now, I love Jordan Peterson. He loves to talk about how masculine and feminine come from this idea of order and chaos. And if you're a lady listener, please hang with me here for a second. Chaos isn't a bad thing. All that is good in life comes from chaos. All that is new and life-giving and invigorating and what we need as a society comes from the chaos. But we also need the order. And right now, our society has a whole lot of chaos. So here's the image I like to use. Imagine you have this beach. So I spent a lot of years in Portland, Oregon, and they have these beaches that are rocky, right? These big, long rock faces come up, and you have these ocean waves come surging, whoosh, and they splash all over the place. And
I'm
the
so glad
tides
we're
are
on
surging.
video.
Right, yeah, it all carries together, I'm a little dramatic when I kind of like to have these images.
I like it.
And so masculine is these rocks. And the feminine, the chaos, is the waves and the tide. And here's this poor rock sitting there on this beachfront, right? And this big old wave comes in and smacks upside the head and says, like, what gives? I didn't do nothing to you. Why are you going to smack me upside the head? Like, seriously, this is crazy. Well, the wave pulls back. And the next wave comes in and smacks the rock upside the head again. And the rock gets himself all worked up because the rock has lost the idea of what does it mean to be a rock. To be masculine means to be grounded, to be firm, to be decisive, to be stable in that point of order. Now, we're men, so we have a feminine side to us as well as a masculine side. But when we live in our masculine energy, that confidence, that the stability, the knowing, there's a core piece of a man that when he makes peace with himself, accepts who he is and whose he is, that he finds this knowing that A, women find crazy attractive, but B, also provides direction for him and his family to move through the craziness of life.
Interesting. Okay. So I guess my question would be, or another one question, sorry. Um, where do you think that fell off the proverbial rails?
You know, I think a lot of times when we look at a situation gone wrong, it's a good first guess to guess that something had something to do with a fear. And let me be real clear, like there are real abuses of men against women throughout history. Like I'm not going to stand here and say that men are flawless and perfect. Of course not. There are real abuses the other direction too. But for the moment, let's just stick with the fact that men have hurt women and men have used that natural rock-like masculine ability to hurt women. And as a result, you know, this is kind of a new experiment we're in right now from an evolutionary human perspective. You know, the human being has been on Earth, depending on which exactly you want to do it, somewhere between, 20,000, 100,000 years. And in those times, democracy is like a tiniest drop in the ocean of time, right? And having men and women engaging in the system of political governments, engaging in the workplace together. This is radically new stuff. Just speaking evolutionarily here, right? I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying it's new, and we don't really know what that means. And so all of a sudden, you go from like one or two individuals having all the power and a whole bunch of peons and serfs that are just scratching through the mud to survive, to like everybody having lots of power and affluence. And so as you see the change of ideology, there's a real and direct hurt that has been perpetuated against women, and they now have a voice to do something about that. And so I think the radical feminism we're seeing rising up is coming from a very real hurt. It's coming from a very real fear that's afraid of the authentic masculine, because when it's used badly, that leads legitimately to harm, to what people oftentimes call toxic masculinity. But understand that it's just like the internet or a chainsaw. Like whatever it is out there, any tool, if you use it badly, it's gonna hurt. I have a chainsaw. Like I love chainsawing. Like I love the Lego Movie. I have 6 kids, so my kids love the Lego Movie. And there's Benny, right? And he's always like spaceship, spaceship. I'm kind of like that way with the chainsaw. I'm like chainsaw, chainsaw. But I'm under no illusions that if I don't carefully control that chainsaw and use it in a safe environment with proper safety procedures, I could cut a leg off. It's like it's a scary tool. And my claim to you is actually the masculine spirit, much like the feminine spirit, is way more dangerous yet, is way more powerful yet. And so when misused, rightly causes a great deal of fear.
Sorry.
You're good. I'm a dog lover too.
Yeah. So what would be the line between what you're speaking on and what is the word? Oh my goodness, I can't think of the word. The puppy threw me off. Oh my goodness, it's the holier than thou male.
Chauvinism or...
There it is, chauvinism.
Yep.
I don't know why I was thinking something with the M. I don't know. Yeah, so where does that line? Because I'm not saying what you're saying sounds chauvinistic at all, but I think from an outsider's point of view, that line can kind of be skewed a little bit.
It totally can. And I'm going to lay a hard truth on you here. The line, just like, my turn to forget a name. Good luck, Archipelago. What's his name? Come to me in a second. The line of good evil goes through every single human heart. It's inside the heart and it's subtle. And it comes down in the essence of, am I operating out of a selfish, egotistical perspective? Or am I operating out of a genuine love, not like I love these new shoes, but real love for those in my life and gratitude and generosity and working for their good? And it's a subtle thing because, Rich, all of us humans, men and women, are very good at deceiving ourselves about what our intentions really are, okay? And so maybe when I say, honey, I need a new side-by-side. It's for the family, so that when I get my new side-by-side, we can all go on rides together. My wife will correctly point out, that's not generosity. That's just you want a side-by-side. And hey, they're awesome. But let's not fool myself here in saying this for me. But now let's make this perhaps a little more dark and real. And when I say, oh, I need this extra power, say politically or in the business or in home, so that I can make sure I take care of people, but I really use that for my own gain. When my ego gets involved, my desire to look good, to be perceived as successful both by myself and others, that's when it crosses over into chauvinism. And again, this comes back to this idea, like with a chainsaw. If I'm using a chainsaw on a piece of firewood, well and good. If I'm using it on the supports of your house, you're gonna get a little upset. And maybe I just want to have a better view. It's like, I live in northern Idaho. It's right out that mountain right there. I've got mountains in my window right there. Very pretty. And if you build a house there, I could say, oh, well, it's for the good of my family. I'm going to take the chainsaw, cut your house down. That way I can have my view back. Right? But this is what we men have to do. And women too. Women have the same thing. Like all of us human beings were selfish. This is not a groundbreaking revelation. But when I indulge my ego, when I allow the good of myself to become more important than the good of those whom I'm called to love and serve and protect, that's when I fall into it. And the most authentic, real, good, and beautiful male leadership comes from complete service. It's when I actually say, hey, I'm here for my wife, I'm here for my kids, I'm here for my family, and I have to put myself as secondary to that. Then I can exercise this perspective in a proper order.
Yeah, I mean, as fellas, we are pretty pretty synonymous with the ego monster.
It's true.
What would be, I guess, a best? And it is completely turned into a Q&A session, but hey, I told you there's no real way for this to kind of go except the way it goes. What when put into action, how does one, I guess, proverbially check their ego at the door and still maintain that masculinity, having that ideals about them without having that little monster creep in? Because that seems like that's a fun little thing to juggle, and by fun I mean completely awful.
So when a man has, I'm going to use this in air quotes, a strong feeling, I'll explain that in a second, his life always goes down the toilet. Here's what I mean by this. Let's say I'm talking to my wife and she says something. I don't care what the words are. And I have a strong feeling about what she said. If I engage in that strong feeling, whatever comes out of my mouth next, things will get worse. And
that's if you're married, fair. Oh, man.
You know this to be true. It's the same thing at work. Let's say you're at work and your boss says some words and you have a strong feeling about these words. Whatever, if you indulge that, whatever comes out of your mouth next will only make things worse. Okay? Mm-hmm. And it's easier and harder than we think to know when the ego's involved. The ego's involved because I want it. Because, oh, I can't tolerate that. I can't. Did you hear what she said? Did you see what he just did to me? Oh, that's inexcusable. Oh my goodness, I'm going to get him for that. I'll show them the truth. The truth's on my side. And it starts to point to me and this insatiable feeling. Now, I want to be very careful because I'm kind of playing fast and loose with the word feeling right now. And I want to articulate clearly that both men and women have emotions, but both men and women experience those emotions differently. And I'm going to speak so my background is in chemistry. I have a PhD in chemistry. And so I love to
I saw that. That's crazy.
Various psychology.
Props to you, man.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a glutton for punishment. Yeah. And the way the female brain views the world is fundamentally different than the male brain. If you're married, again, you're like, well, duh, Michael. But I want to really expand upon this a bit because one of the things that our whole I'm going to call it like gender identicalness. That's not what they call it, but that's what they're trying to push for. A movement has really lost sight of is the beauty of the difference between men and women. And women make decisions in a very healthy way from their emotions. And I mean this 100%. A woman, the way her lens works with the world, she can have this big feeling, this big emotion, and move through that in her femininity, in her chaos, to a beautiful outcome, a beautiful expression of love. Men, that's not true. The Rock's not supposed to have feelings, okay? Let me rephrase that statement. I misspoke. I want to retract that. The Rock's not supposed to act from that surge of feeling. The masculine is at its strongest when it acts from a place of calm. when it acts from a place of order, from a place of decision. And hey, look, I've had big feelings. We lost a dog about a year ago now. I love the dog. It was
Mhm.
very beautiful, and I cried,
Yeah.
and
Look,
I
don't
cried with
show
my
me an
children.
ASPCA commercial, man. I'll that, or you showed me like on YouTube the military fellas coming home. Yep, it's real oniony in this room here. I don't know. Yeah,
Exactly. Hey, it's healthy as a man to have feelings,
yeah,
but I have to understand that I don't access my power, my masculine energy, by making a radical decision while in that feeling.
right,
It may not be the best thing for my family with 6 kids, much of which are little, to just decide our dog died. Let's grab a puppy. That way we'll
right,
have a puppy around the house to add to all the other poop we have to clean up.
right.
Like, that's not me coming at it from the best and healthiest perspective, okay? And so, as a man, you ask this question, how do I really stay out of the ego? And it's to identify the types of feelings that are in defense of myself, that are pointed towards my own personal gain at the expense of someone else, and to know that those feelings are holistically destructive to what I want in this world. And I'm just going to throw faith in here for just a second to what I believe that God has put me here to accomplish in this world.
No, that's beautiful. I mean, look, I started off with I think I started off with this, either that or it was off stream, one of the two. It's kind of not cool for dudes to have feelings. Is kind of the MO of society, and the whole strong, silent type, yada yada yada, all that. Cool, but I think once you actually embrace, like, yeah, no, it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to feel something, but be in your feelings, fine. Just don't make decisions while in said feelings, because
Let me
that,
use a
like you said, that's kind of where you make bad decisions. It's like driving. It's kind of like how they say when you take certain medicines or you're drinking, don't operate heavy machinery. Well, yeah, don't don't make a life choice while you're sad.
The other day, my 9-year-old did something silly. She's a child. They always do something silly. And I overreacted. I got worked up and I was too harsh. And I waited till I calmed down. And when I was calm, I went up to her and I said, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I should not have spoken to you the way that I spoke to you. Will you forgive me? And in her childlike way, she goes, oh, it's fine, Dad. I love you. Okay, so she starts walking around like, no, no. I pulled her back, pulled her in her hug. I said, it is not fine. I'm saying, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And I want you to notice in this moment, I'm doing this with powerful emotion. Like, I'm acknowledging I had a strong emotion in the moment, and I have a strong emotion now, this desire to reconnect with my child. And the emotion is very present, but the decision is coming from this ordered desire for unity in the household and for reparation of a damage that was done. And so it's a delicate balance here. And I have to amend your statement one little bit there. I think men today are allowed to have two emotions. They're allowed to have anger and lust.
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
like, look at Indiana Jones. Like, he just captures that. Every single movie, he's got anger and lust. They come through in spades, right? And men are called, those, ironically, those two are the ones, because those two, when indulged in, rarely give us what we want. But when the feelings of connection, which are very powerful in men, are allowed to be expressed, many good things can come.
Look, I'm absolutely guilty of that. I got the kiddos here too, and I convinced myself, or pretend, I don't even know what you would call it. I I'm definitely more militant than the wife,
Yes.
and I mean that's kind of how that usual household structure goes. But I was raised by my grandparents, so I think the generational gap affected that, and I'm very much, if I have to tell you twice, I already told you three times too many. And I expect a lot of them, but you forget, look, they're kids, man. They're kids.
Yeah.
And I find myself getting very worked up over, I'm repeating myself again to you. Why? And it's like, well, think about what you did as a kid. You didn't care. You're like, oh, yeah, whatever, man. I'm going to go do this other thing, and I'll eventually do that other thing. And I don't do the apology that much, but when I do, I know exactly what you're saying, because yes, you are coming from an emotional state, but it is a calm. It's almost like you have a bubble around that emotion where you're aware of what you're doing. You're not coming from a frantic state. You're coming from a very, it's almost like you planned out your conversation already. When you just do a rash thing when you're pissy about something, it's like, whoa, 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 and you're like, well, I flew off the handle. That's self-serving, really, and it's not beneficial for anybody. And I think you're definitely right. We as guys, we got those two emotions. Those are the two acceptable ones. Everything else is kind of, I mean, are you sure? Like you almost get questioned. It's like, well, what's wrong with you? Like,
Right.
why are you? And that it's a weird thing because I don't think there's anything wrong with being connected with your actual emotions. Like, it's cool to be sad. It's cool to feel other stuff than just angry and horny. Like that's not like that's not really sounds like a fun Friday. Like I don't. What are you doing here? That's not. You got other stuff going through the week.
You know, one thing I want to open up that you just brought up is this idea that fathers and mothers parent very differently. And here's one way to look at this, and a lot of people have found this helpful. The mother loves the child immensely right now, in this moment. The father loves the child immensely in the future. And when a father sees the present moment, his natural inclination is to love the child in the future a bit more than the child in the now. And here's how this comes out. I
Yeah, I'm
watch
interested.
my kid doing something that doesn't matter now, but I know if they keep doing it, it'll have a big consequence when they're a teenager or when they're an adult. And so I roll in on it from the perspective of I've got to cut this off now while the consequences are low so that later on it won't bite you in the bum, possibly like it did me. Whereas the mother errs to the other side, and she disregards the future to love the child so much in the right now that she will oftentimes not weigh the future consequences of an action sufficiently. And now I'm saying this in the sense of erring, not that we err in every transition, but our natural tendency is to err in that direction. This is one of the many, many reasons why children need both a mother and a father. The statistical data on this is overwhelming. The number of studies that have been concluded that the value a child gets from a mother and a father is just over the top high.
Fully agree.
And part of that is we as men need to lean into the value of the different perspective that we bring. Rich, you're supposed to have more love for your child in the future than now. You'll err too far sometimes in that direction, of course. But that is the value you bring to them as their father, one of the many values you bring to them as a father. And when you accept that about yourself, because here's what happens with most men I know. Most men watch their wives. And the wives, oh, come here, I'll kiss the boo-boo. They love them in the moment, which is great. That's what they're supposed to do. But then the men are like, that's not what I feel like. That's not my natural inclination. And the wives, they're like, whoa, what's going on over there? You're getting a little bit worked up there. This one doesn't seem so big. And the men question themselves. And they're like, am I wrong? Should I be doing this the maternal way? And the answer is your wife is probably a little bit right, that you probably did go a little too far. But the other half of the equation is you got to own your charter is different than hers. You're not supposed to be another mother. The child doesn't need two mommies. The child needs a mommy and a daddy. And they're different. And what dads bring will feel off to a mommy. She'll be like, oh, I don't like that. That doesn't feel right. And it's not supposed to feel right to her. It's different. You're providing something different. And when a man compromises his parental obligation out of fear that his wife is upset and in a desire to please her, both he suffers because he's a shallower version of himself, his wife suffers because there's less there to love and respect, and the children suffer because they're not getting what dad needed to give them. But here's the other perspective. If I learn to embrace that, hey, I'm not perfect. I am a flawed person, Rich. But my natural job is to love the child of the future. And I spend some time thinking when I plan ahead. One of my secret weapons to parenting is to plan out consequences. By the way, above age 7, I love burpees. I don't know if you guys have done the exercise where like the burpee is just you jump down to the ground, you do a push-up, stand up and do a jump. It's a great consequence for kids above 7 because they hate it, but it also gets their energy out. And it's
right.
And then I will sit there with this calm voice. Oh, I see you just did that thing that we talked about. Do you remember what we said the consequence was? That's right. It was 20 burpees. Go ahead and do 20 burpees right now. And I can say that with this calm perspective. I have a plan.
You are a monster and I love you.
Another great one, by the
Is-
way, is wall sits. If you just
I
Google wall sits.
Oh no, I remember those. Those will get your quads real good, real quick.
Oh yeah, they do. Kids hate those, and they're
Oh
so good for them
man,
too, which is why
I'm
this is so great.
absolutely stealing these. So you
Yeah,
know.
by all means. This is free goodness. But here's the real secret, though, Rich.
Uh,
When I have a plan, I sit there in my calmness, in my order, in my masculine energy. And even if my wife thinks my consequence too hard, because I'm in that order, her natural orientation is to not be elevated in her own emotions as well. Okay? When I do it from my place of strength and I show up in that, this is what we talked about. This was the consequence. Just this morning, my kids have some audiobook devices they get. And I told them this morning, because I told them yesterday that if the room wasn't cleaned before they grab their audiobooks, they lose their audiobooks for the day. And guess what happened this morning? Their room wasn't clean. And so in a super calm voice, I walked around and said, okay, cool. I picked them up real delicately. We talked about this yesterday. The room wasn't clean, so we lose our audiobooks for today. And there was wailing and moaning and gnashing of teeth and, oh, it's so horrible, inhumane treatment coming from the kids. And I just was the calmest thing. And you know what? I was so confident in my position. And I'm not saying my policies are perfect. But when I show up in that energy, the way my kids respond, the way my wife responds is so much better than when I show up in a big yucky feeling of nastiness.
yeah, I mean, and not for nothing, the follow through is so. Here, really quick. Let me backtrack here. Um, this is the only thing that me and the wife actually have a pain point on is parenting styles.
Yep.
And I come from a place of, yeah, I'm admittingly so, I'm easily irritated. It is what it is. I don't really dabble too much in stupidity. It really bothers me, and repetitiveness really drives me nutso. But you're absolutely right. My mentality is, I'm I'm losing my mind on you right now because I know, like, I want you to have a rhythm. I want you to have goals. I want you to be responsible. I'm looking at you 4 years down the road, like, okay, he's still not cleaning his room for no reason. Like, these are simple things you should be able to handle without any question. And the wife looks at me. She's like, dude, what do you do? Like, why are you trying to take everything he owns? It's like, because I'm tired of killing him. And it definitely, I will not be the most, I guess, the most rational and level headed. Definitely something I should work on because the point gets lost in the emotion. You know, you
Yes.
come in there with you're full of fire, and you're like, clean your room. Oh my god! And it's like, um, you're freaking me out. Like, I get what you're saying, but can you leave? Because I'm just going to be focused on that emotion. Um, yeah. So that's just crazy. When you started explaining to me, I'm just in my head. I'm like, that's exactly. I can't. I wasn't able to articulate that, but that's exactly how I think.
That is the common experience for almost every type A male. Generally, we marry our opposites. We type A males tend to generally marry a type B female, which is fine. We love them. They're great women. But this quintessential experience of anger becoming the cornerstone piece of a discipline strategy is so common. But I want to go back to what I said earlier. Every time a man operates out of a big yucky feeling, his life goes
Bad things
down
happen.
the toilet. It's just true. And so, as a man, if you want to have a good relationship with your wife and your kids, the onus is on you to figure out, what am I going to do? You have a proper calling. You have a good, holy, proper job to do to raise these children. Like, literally, that is your job as a dad. Okay? You bring something different. Accept and embrace that part of your job. And it's okay that your wife doesn't understand. She's not supposed to. It's not her job. It's your job. You don't understand her job. You just don't get so worked up over the fact you don't understand she does. But that's okay. That's just women because they're chaos. And one of the things that when you really embrace the idea of the order and chaos perspective, you understand that chaos is supposed to be chaotic. That's why you love it. I mean, we men sometimes get frustrated by this, but maybe one helpful metaphor. So we live pretty far north, as I mentioned this earlier. In the wintertime, it gets cold.
Yeah.
But we also live right next to an amazing downhill ski resort. And so there are moments my kids are like, oh, I hate living out in the cold. But we're 18 minutes drive from this awesome downhill ski resort. And then we jump in the car and go do that, and they have the blast. And I'm like, yeah, because we live in the cold. Like there's a balance. You have to look at the whole thing. Women bring the chaos, but that's also what we men love about them. And so it's okay that she's in her chaos, and that's good. And you need to give her space to do that. But you need to be the order. And that means think ahead. Be like, here's one of great injunctions to a man. When you make a verbal statement, it is a double binding statement. This is not true for women necessarily. It can be at times, but it's always true for a man. Here's an example. If you don't eat your food, I will not give you any grapes. Simple enough. It's double binding. But it's a double binding statement for a man because it binds the child and it binds me. And the reason why is if I break my word that I've made here, I undermine the essence of what order is. Okay? If my wife changes her mind, her essence is more chaos. That's okay. But as a man, my word has a particular binding nature upon me. And so I have to tell guys, be careful what you bind yourself to and really decide, is this something you want to bind yourself to? And think about that ahead of time. I've had several times in my parenting where I'm like, this. Oh, you know what, kids, take that back. I'm not gonna actually bind that one there because I realize I don't want to be bound to carry through whatever I just said. And there's something there as dads that as we start to realize the right power and perspective to come from as a father, we start to be able to do it out of a place of greater calmness.
Yeah, I mean, let me just kind of put this out there. The wife is an amazing mother, and I'm gonna put the dog in the dryer if he keeps yapping. Anyway, he's very anti people coming around the house lately. I don't know what's going on. Puppy enough. She's a ridiculously good mother. Like, I couldn't imagine anyone doing better with the kiddos and just how she handles everything with grace. And I don't know. I couldn't be a lady. It's too much. It gives me a headache. But yeah, you're right. Like she is very in the moment and she handles it and it's very, come here, baby. Everything is okay. And the kids need that, but they also need, as you said, that order and that direction of, hey, have your nurturing time here, but I'm the person that's coming in telling you, hey, life's hard, get a helmet. Let's get moving. Let's get our proverbial stuff straight. So when you get out in the real world, we're able to kind of kick back because it's going to kick you. And it is hard to harness that emotion because you're so passionate about it. And if you actually care about your kid, you're passionate about it. Like that's one part. And you in your head, you're like, I'm coming with love. Like there's a big old anger. It's like a piece of chicken wrapped in bacon. The bacon is the anger. And
I love the metaphor.
Yeah, I'm very hungry now. And in your head, you're like, exactly what you're trying to portray. But the kid's like from an intellectual standpoint, still kind of an idiot. Like they're not on your intellectual level. So all they hear is loud words with, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. It's like, yeah, I know. And I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Yeah, it's definitely something you own. Like, yeah, that is how you operate. But it's kind of the delivery is what needs to be polished.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that just sounds kind of, what you have almost perfected, I guess, in for lack of a better term. Yeah.
Let me first throw some humility in. By no means do I say that I'm perfect. That is a long cry. But let me give you an image here that might be helpful. When kids are younger, one of the best instructors is a hot stove. So consider the hot stove for a moment, right? Think of the old school electric stove with the burners that glow red, right?
Yeah.
So you walk up here, it's good. Oh, look, it glows red. I want to touch it. Boom. Ah! The hot stove delivers the same consequence every time, 100% consistent. It's immediate. And it's very effectively targeted to tell you exactly what went wrong. Yeah. But it does not yell at them. Nobody grows up with a complex that my hot stove didn't love me. My hot stove betrayed me. We grew up and we're like, yeah, it's just a hot stove. It's just what it does. There's no complex, deep resentment of the stove. Like, I can't believe the stove's always got it out for me. because as humans, we don't maintain that same level of structure. And with my children, when I tell them ahead of time, if you do this thing, it's going to be 20 burpees. And they do it. I had one time, as an 8-year-old, and she looks at me, and she'd been fighting. I said, you two stop it right now. And if either you touch each other again, it's 50 burpees, which is a lot of burpees, if dear listener, if you haven't done burpees. And this 8-year-old looks at me, and I kid you not, she stares at me, and takes her finger and goes, boom. And I say, okay, 50 burpees. And I just sat there and I counted them for her. And she gets back up, and her sister's still there. And I say, if you touch her again, it's 50 burpees more. She looks at me, same look, boom. And I'm like, okay, 50 burpees more. She's like, but Dad, because she's testing me. Am I going to be consistent? And at the end of that, she got up and she said, okay, I'm done. There was no resentment. I mean,
she currently now has an 8-pack.
Well, yeah, that is one of the cool things about burpees is it does also deliver that. But like with younger children, the onus for us men is to show up in a state of order, in a state of predictability, in a state of calmness. And it is so hard. Most of the time we fail because we feel powerless. We don't have a good option ready to go. And the more we can cut that off, the more calm we can be. But I want to make one subtle distinction, which is as the children start to age, boys and girls, while they're always different, become much more different, particularly around puberty. And when boys hit puberty, they start looking at dad as a role model for what to become. And it becomes really, really important that you as a father, you treat your son in the way you want him to act, because he will imprint off you what it means to be a man. And that comes exclusively from you and does not come from mom. That's a very specific, unique thing men have for boys. And for girls, it's just as scary. Your daughter is going to marry a man who treats her the way that you treat her. Right. And so if you treat her with anger, she will marry a man who will treat her with anger for the rest of her marriage. Oof. And that's a very heavy responsibility to think about as a father. And there's this funny inversion that needs to start happening when girls hit puberty, where to a certain extent, dad does have to start backing off and mom has to start coming in to put a little more pressure on for what needs to be done. Because that's just the proper order that there needs to be. That's not true for sons, but that is true for daughters. And there's subtleties here, and it's not always just black and white, love your child in the future. But understanding how that dance goes, what the children are printing off you, and the critical value those kids have, that you show up not as a copy of mom, but as an actual you, as a dad, as a man.
Yeah, that's why I'm very happy I don't have any gals. I got the boys, and that I'm very much shotgun on the porch. You want to do what with my daughter now? Yeah, no.
My sister is a large animal veterinarian, and so I told her that. So my oldest daughter is 12, and I told her pretty soon I need to borrow the horse castration tools and hang those from the porch.
Yeah, because I've been a boy for 37 years. I know how we think. So very happy we're not like my main goal for the kiddos are, don't knock anybody up and don't become a serial killer. That's kind of everything else is kind of like within, we can handle it.
One-off killing, fine. Serial killing, right out. Gotcha.
Right. Yeah. I mean, everyone gets one. Just let us know. We'll hide the body, all that stuff, because we love you. So look, what made you even get into this? Into coaching fellas up and because that seems like it's obviously there's a market for it, but to get people to accept your message, I feel like that is one of the harder things that I've actually spoken to people about. A lot of folks have their regular kind of jobs. They coach them on business, real estate, whatever. You're like, I'm going to teach you how to feel correctly and how it's okay. Like that's a heavy thing, man.
It is. Henry David Thoreau said that most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And I think that is more true in our time than ever. And here's why I bring that up. That was my life. And I don't have time to do the story justice. There's plenty of other podcast interviews out there that tell the story. But I grew up in an extremely abusive home. My father went to jail for 10 years when I was in 6th grade after he did stuff to my sister. It was an extremely abusive home, physical, all of it.
Right.
And I left with the biggest chip on my shoulder and hating the world. I was angry. I was full of hate. I chased ladies because that felt good. I drank like a fish. Like I could outdrink you 2 times over when I was in my prime in college, right? And I tried that really hard. And not too surprisingly, it didn't work for me. I was like, this isn't right. I'm not actually, you'd only wake up in a pool of your own vomit so many times before you're like, no, this kind of sucks. I'm getting old. This is getting old.
Yeah.
And I decided I needed help. And so I started reaching out. And one after another, I was introduced to world class mentors, men who stepped into my life and really volunteered to help me make some real changes, one after another. And several of them were just so powerful that I knew that I had to like share some of what they'd done. So when I was still working in the corporate jobs, I have a PhD in chemistry doing corporate research, and I had a back-to-back world's best boss to world's worst boss transition. And so I started mentoring all these people around, and I loved it so much so that even once I left the corporate life, they would come back to me for years afterwards, trying to get this, figured out. And I just realized this is something I can offer to the world. But here's the deal: it's not as hard of a sell as you think once you articulate it properly, because all of our experiences are the same. Even now, as I'm talking to you, you're resonating when I talk about the pain of parenting as a father, because it's real pain. It's a deep pain that's in there. And the human being is a being that desires to get rid of pain. And most of the time, that's a good thing. There's ways it misfires. But most of the time, that's a healthy impulse. And so I talk to somebody, I'm like, well, tell me what's going on. And I'll say, well, is this happening? Is this happening? Oh, yeah, it is. Well, where is this going to go? Oh, well, it'll go there. Are you okay with it going there? Where will it go next? And they'll say, oh, oh, oh. And there's this resonance of experience that I think most men today are having because we've lost our sense of community. Look, Rich, 200 years ago, my industry didn't exist. You didn't need it because nobody ever moved more than 5 miles from where you grew up. You know old man Bill over there, and he's a cool dude, so you got to talk to him every time you have a problem. Bill, I'm having trouble with my marriage. Oh, sit down. Let's talk about that. Okay, cool. There we go. I trust Bill. He tells me what's going on. He slaps him on the head a couple times. I go back and my life's looking a little better. Well, we've moved. I don't trust Bill anymore. Bill's not there. And Bill's not in a retirement home. I'm just on some suburbia block where I don't know anyone. Okay, maybe I borrowed a cup of sugar from my neighbor once, and I don't remember their name. And I've got no one to talk to anymore. I have no perspective for this. And this wisdom that was handed down through the generations through all of time, now is stoppered up. And so this is why you're seeing this explosion of life coaching industry. And while there is an explosion, the bulk of the explosion has been for women. I think there's a lot of people who are afraid to speak the hard truths men need to hear. Let me maybe answer this question with one final summary sentence. Men thrive on challenge in the same way that women thrive on praise. And if you really dig into that, that is a profound difference. Your wife, the woman in your life, need praise. It's a fundamental, it's a fuel they burn. Men need challenge. You can give to your wife a piece that she needs to grow that she cannot give to you. A woman cannot challenge a man in the perfect way. In moments here and there, I'm speaking statistically, of course, but as a general statistical rule, women cannot give to men what they need to grow. Men need to be challenged. Men need another man to stand there, stare them right in the eye and say, dude, you're messing it up. You know you're on the wrong path. What is your plan to fix it? And how are you going to make sure you get there? We need that as a man. And even as painful as it is, there's a piece of us that welcomes that recognizes it. This is what Jordan Peterson talks about when he invites people to listen to the idea of responsibility. There's a challenge there that men's spirit thrives upon. And that isn't being talked about much right now.
Huh. Feel like it was like a mic drop moment right there. Well, yeah, pun intended. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's. Huh. Yeah, that's really good.
Well, if I could ever so gently point out, I've challenged you several times in this conversation. I've challenged you as a parent. I did it subtly and gently. I've challenged you in terms of, being that point of stability and emotional solidarity. And I've watched your face as we've had this conversation. And you've leaned into that challenge. A lot of people on a public setting podcast would be like, oh, let's shift the topic here. But no, you leaned in, something you resonated. And this is what men need.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a validation in a way of your instinctual lizard brain feelings on what you do as a parent or a man or whatever. You can't always like you know what you're doing, you're on autopilot, yada yada yada, but you seem to actually put words to those feelings. So you like, oh, that's why I'm doing that. I'm not just a lunatic that flies off the handle. I mean, yeah, slightly, but there's more
We're
to
all
it.
a little loony. We're all a little loony.
Right.
It's okay. We'll unite in that looniness too.
So what I gotta I mean, and this is a weird self-serving question, but it's what I do. What does that do for you? Like knowing that you're providing the service, like that's gotta be a crazy good feeling.
I always am incredibly vague whenever I talk about clients at all. So I'm gonna meld several different clients into a story.
Fair.
Bob comes up to me, and Bob is really struggling. He isn't succeeding at work. He isn't. His wife won't have sex with him. He's super grumpy. His children don't respect him. And I get on an hour-long phone call with Bob. And at first, Bob says, "Hell, here's all the stuff going wrong in my life." And I start digging. And within about 20, 30 minutes, I've got an idea. Okay, well, Bob, let's talk about this. And said, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about these other problems. Let's just humor me for a second. And we go into that. And turns out Bob hates himself and thinks he's a failure. And this is a profound identity piece of Bob, okay? And I say, Bob, in a very gentle, loving way, I'm going to take that away from you. And we're going to rebuild your identity as something else. And we go through, and it's a painful process. And Bob's got to be in it for the pain. It is not comfortable. But here's what happens. We get up to maybe week 3, week 4 in this process. Bob comes and says, whoa, something was different. I didn't respond the same way I normally do to my wife and my kids this week. I don't know what's happening. But I kind of like it. And time goes on, and Bob comes up and says, hey, that thing that normally I lose it at when my wife does it, I didn't lose it. I don't know what's happening here, but I really like it. This is good. And at some point in time, Bob comes up to me and he'll say, my life isn't the same anymore. I felt powerless. I felt unable to do what I knew I needed to do. I couldn't get what I wanted. And I just felt so stymied and kept getting stuck. And oftentimes Bob is crying now when he says this to me. And I'm crying too because I don't mind crying. Crying is natural. And he says, but this work has changed that. And I'm going to pull the faith piece in one more time because for me as a man of faith, this is critical.
Hey, there's no problem there, man.
And I feel so humbled that God has allowed me to participate in this transformation process of Bob. And there's just, that moment when you have a child that's been struggling so long with something and finally achieves it as a parent, and you just feel like you're in this cloud nine, you're riding that joy with a child. That's the closest analogy I have to it. And it is so rewarding to watch somebody who's been crippled by a lie, by a vow. We're going to dive into a little bit into terminology here. A vow is something that when I have a bad emotional experience, I make a vow, I will never do this, I will never be that. And that can cripple us for a lifetime. And when we break free of that, or we break free of the lie, we break free of the image and the identity piece, and we suddenly, it's like taking a breath of free air, and you're free to engage in the world and to enact your will and to be the order and to see the world start to align to your order now that that's flowing properly. Dude, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's almost like watching a seed being planted that develops into a beautiful flower, and knowing that you were there to do your due diligence for said flower. It still had to do its own kind of thing. Now it's this different thing that it was before, and that's super nice, man. Yeah, and look, I'm a believer. Look, I'm not a super religious person by any stretch. I have zero qualms with those that are. I don't have any judgment. I'm not that guy. But I do believe that we're all here for some reason. We have a bigger purpose than just being a part of a plot of land. And it's really cool that you were able to, find said purpose, and you're providing a service to actually better more people. So you're adding that accrued equity to your actual life. And that's just awesome, because there's a lot of people that, I hate to say it, don't really bring too much to the table, or they don't know that they bring too much to the table, and it's just
I think
wasted.
they've given up.
Yeah, and
they've given up hope that they can bring something to the table, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, because everyone can do something. I'm an idiot with a podcast. There's that. Yeah. So there's my contribution to the world, but yeah, that's the beautiful thing you're doing. Because I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't exactly know what I was getting into with this interview. I had no idea. And that's kind of why I don't do too much looking into it. I look at the cliff notes, like, okay, because I want to be surprised. I want to have that organic you know, quote unquote relationship with that person during that hour or so. So I'm not coming in here with any preconceived notions or thoughts. I mean, I don't want to come in here sounding like an idiot, but I want to know what you say. I don't care what you wrote, you know?
Can I ever so gently, with your permission,
Yes.
put my coaching hat for one more moment?
Yes.
You've called yourself an idiot a lot of times going through this process.
Okay.
Oftentimes, when men use that sort of language to describe themselves, it's because deep down, and this is almost universal in all men, we all allow our failures in life to become our identity. And it's safer to be called an idiot than it is to be called a failure. To be capable and to fail is a more damning statement about a man than to be an idiot who was never capable in the first place. However, when we go into the idiot framework, we surrender the power that we have, the power that God gave us, which is that capability. And my invitation to you and to everyone's listening, because this is so common, and I'm sure most of us speak to ourselves in our head in such a horrible way that were someone to speak to one of our children that way, we would beat the snot out of them.
Right.
But we do it to ourselves all the time. My invitation to you and to all of them is to stop doing that and to recognize that, hey, you have made mistakes. We all have. I've made more than most. That's life. And the humility that comes from saying, it's okay that I've made mistakes. I'm still of value. I still am of worth. And then approaching the comment of saying, rather than I'm an idiot, of saying, I am doing what I can with what I have for the greater glory that I've been put here to serve, is such a different perspective, and it brings that peace. When we use the idiot terminology, we undermine our own rockiness, our own solidity, because only an idiot's just waffly. Like, who knows what an idiot's going to do? Every village has got one, right? But But when we establish ourselves as imperfect, but authentic and vulnerable and real, there's a strength that comes that echoes and resonates around us. And I believe that. Let me back up a step, and then this is a statement. The studies tell us that roughly 7% of the information that you and I exchange comes from the words I use. About 35% comes from my tone, and about 53% comes from my body language. Particularly true if we're speaking in person. This is maybe a little bit less body language. You can't see as much of my body.
Right.
I believe we communicate far more beyond even that. And the amount that we communicate out is so complex. And this is why some women, you can be a fat dude and have all the chicks love you because you're radiating out the confidence and the solidness that they want. And you can be the hottest dude in the world who repels chicks because you're radiating out that you're an a-hole.
Right.
Okay? Like, this is just, I know that we have, even within the religious framework, we don't have the language yet to describe how and what is being transmitted. But it's undeniable it is. I mean, everyone's had the experience. You're sitting in a computer, you're working, and the hairs in the back of your neck pick up because all of a sudden someone walked in the room and is staring at you.
Right. Yeah.
It's a universal
Wife
experience.
loves to do that.
Yeah, totally. I sometimes do it to my wife too. It's kind of fun. Anyways, that's a separate story. As we communicate this out, be very careful and aware of what you're communicating. And when I describe myself as an idiot, I communicate that out in more than words. And so I pre-program others to consider me as such. And it sounds kind of cool and self-deprecating and, oh yeah, look like that. And I do the same thing. But instead, the real humility is, this is who I am, this is what I do. I do the best I can, and I screw up a lot. I do. But here I'm going to show up, I'm going to try. And I'm going to show up to this interview and give you the very best I can, knowing I had a couple of verbal flubs. That happens.
No, you have been beautiful, man. Like, you got me over here in my noggin wondering, like, yeah, I just kind of always thought that was self-deprecating humor. Maybe I am being hard on myself, unintentionally, subconsciously, whatever. It's really get out of my head, you wizard. What are you doing?
I'll ask you this last question. What kind of man do you want to be? We all have this image in our head of a man who's wise, who's balanced, who's got perspective, who speaks with authority, who people listen to, who, when he moves, people respond. That man does not call himself an idiot. Go ahead.
I would say someone that I can look in the mirror and be proud of.
Yeah. Is that person an idiot?
Nope.
There you go.
They are not.
Nor are you.
This guy. Good God. little misty in here.
Oh, those
No,
onions. Your
that's
wife just walked by with some onions again, didn't she?
yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know what she's doing over here. No, that's powerful, man. Like, cause it's almost like that little kind of what I think it was in a movie, but it's kind of was it Goodwill Hunting where it's like it's okay, and like one of the guys breaks down. I think it's Goodwill Hunting. I don't remember, but like sometimes it's okay to have someone tell you it's okay and just feel your feels, and that's beautiful, man. Like, because it's weird because you initially when you because we got to wrap it up here, but when you let in, it's very almost be a guy, be a guy, be a guy. It's like, what does that mean? But when you actually dig into what you're saying, it's like, I'm not saying you need to be here and, strong, silent type, do what I say, gender roles, nothing like that. It's just like, look, embrace who you are, understand who you are, and don't let that falter.
Let me throw one last piece to that. The more I embrace myself as broken and as weak and love myself anyways, the better I will love my wife when she is thus, the better I will love my children. We spoke a lot about children. And one powerful piece for a man to love his children, just doing the boneheaded idiot things kids do, is when he is able to embrace that piece of himself as well. A lot of times when we get angry at our kids, we're actually reflecting the anger we have at ourselves for our own boneheaded actions, which we do too, of course.
Yeah, this was a heavy episode, man. Like you're you're doing good work out here,
Well,
and
I appreciate it.
I I'm very happy I picked you. um, so look, we're kind of at the end of the road here. So Mike, get all your information out here. I mean, obviously, here's what I do. I gather all your info, put it all in the notes in the description. Everything gets uploaded. I mean, it's late, so I'll do it tomorrow morning. So I have to do all the things to it. But yeah, tell everyone where they find you. All the places, what they can, what services you offer, all that jazz.
So my primary service is life coaching. It's what we're doing right now. It's what you've been so gracious to volunteer yourself as a willing victim for me to demonstrate upon. And you can find
I
me.
like it.
So I am a man of faith, and the faith plays a role. And I'll talk to you, whatever you're at, but I am not reserved about my faith. And so you'll find me at Catholic Life Coach for Men. Throw a .com on there, and that's my website. Leave the .com off. You have my podcast. And I don't actually do a lot of social media. This is me. I put myself out there, and
Probably for the best. Honestly, it's a dumpster fire out there
it
sometimes.
is, part of self-awareness means knowing what's good for me, and me and Twitter, it was not a healthy thing. Like, I don't need to go into that and become that person. It's like, so the Walmart where I live, right? There's this woman's lingerie is right between the meat, which is one of my favorite parts of the grocery style, and the ammunition, the guns, is my favorite spot in the sorting goods. So does Michael walk from the meat to the ammunition directly? No, women's lingerie is in the middle. I go up through like the electronics and the pets, and up through the paint, and then back down over to the sporting goods that way, right? Why?
Right.
Because I don't need to walk through that. My brain doesn't need that going in right now. And
Right.
that's just a statement of humility. Like, I think it's just fine. I don't mind the extra steps. I could use them anyways.
Interesting. Well, look, man. I can't appreciate you more for spending your night here. I don't know what time it is out your way. I think it's what 5-ish at this point.
Yep. I'm a Pacific.
Okay. Yep. Never been out that way. Never. I know the wife has flown out to California, and she had a little jet lag deal there. But yeah, I've never actually had the experience of going out to the West Coast. But
if you ever have a chance, the Rocky Mountains, northern Idaho, Montana, just stunningly beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, I love them so much.
We have a plan in play here at some point. We just want to take a month off from work and just do like road trips throughout America. Just
Amen,
because,
brother.
why not?
You only live once.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen all the Caribbean. We've done that a bunch of times. So it's like, we should maybe check out where we live. That would be an interesting little caveat to life.
Spend some time up in the mountains. I grew up in northern Michigan. I loved it.
Oh,
And
okay.
I always thought I'd go back to northern Michigan until I moved out here and fell in love with the mountains. Like, we have gigantic lakes. They're not as big as the Great Lakes, of course, but they're big lakes. We have mountains that go up thousands of feet. You can get up there. It's just beautiful.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to take a gander there, man, because it actually does sound nice. I'm in Pittsburgh and there's nothing here.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, hey, it's gray all the time. All right, nice.
Well, when I finally left the corporate world, my wife and I both committed that we wanted to go live somewhere we really love and is really beautiful.
Yeah.
And so this is that.
I'm glad you found your happiness, and I'm really, really glad you're doing really good things in the world. Because honest to God, I think forget the thing. I believe you are actually making a big difference with people and in the world, and I'm just very honored to be able to, have a conversation, let alone meet you. So I appreciate your time and just thank you.
Do I have time for one more quick story about the word believe?
Oh my God, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, let's do this one. So I think so many people misuse the word believe, and here's my story. Have you ever been to Niagara Falls? It's a
No,
beautiful
but I
set of
think
falls.
it's on our docket to do. But yeah, I haven't been.
So Niagara Falls, big long stretch, roaring falls, and this high wire walker shows up. Right, he puts up his little high wire. He's got his crowd. He's getting worked up. He goes in the high wire, goes across, comes back. They're all cheering. He says, "Okay, who believes I can do this with a blindfold on?" They're all worked up. Says, "Yeah, we believe." And so he does. He puts the blindfold on. Comes back, does it. He totters kind of theatrically for the fun of it to get the crowd going. And he says, "Okay, who believes I can do it with a blindfold and a bicycle?" And they go, "We believe." The crowd's crazy. And he gets on his bicycle with his blindfold. It comes back again, even more theatrical tottering. And he walks up there to the stage. "Okay, for my final act of the day, who believes I can do it with a blindfolded bicycle and another man on my shoulders?" At this point, the crowd is in a frenzy. They're just screaming, "I believe, I believe, I believe." And he leans forward. He says, "Cool." And step on up and climb on board.
Oh.
And when we say, "I believe," that's what we're saying to the universe. And when we treat that word lightly, we undermine our own ability to define who we are, and what we believe in. So do not treat that word lightly ever, but understand the commitment, the verbal contract I enter into when I state, "I believe this to be true."
Well, with that being said, I will tell you, I will double down. I believe that you are doing very good things in the world, and I believe you're offering an amazing service for men just understanding what you are. There's not a book, there's not a blueprint for that.
This is an area that I do believe the world needs, which is why I'm doing it.
Now I'm thinking about it, every time I say it, I'm like, all right, hold on.
That's one of the dangers. You work with me, I'm gonna reprogram certain words in your head.
Listen, it's eye opening. It really, really is. Like you are very good at what you do, and it's very subtle, and it's not invasive, and you come to your conclusions, but you're like, hey, by the way, so like 26 minutes ago, I said this one thing, and you had this look, and it's like, yeah, It's very interesting, man, and I appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed this. You've been an awesome host, and I've had a blast.
Thank you. Well, look, Mike, I will bid you adieu so you can go do family stuff because it's probably dinner time around your out there, so you have to go kill an animal and get that fried up. wilderness guy out here.
You joke. It's not that far from the truth some days, but not today.
Fair enough. Well, everyone, you're going to see all of this uploaded tomorrow. All of Mike's information, his website, his socials, all that's going to be, well, like there are socials, but you know what I mean, are all going to be in the description. So once again, thank you for taking the time out with me, and you have a good rest of the night. Thanks for showing up, everybody.